Hey everyone, and welcome to Spilling the Spirituality. Here we are with another episode, another shocking episode. Today we are talking about shame. Ooh, shame. Yeah,
Hmm.
shame's a dark, kind of lower vibe, lower emotion, and you know, I think it's just about as much of a bummer as like guilt is. I can't think of anything that's like worse than shame. You think about shame and you're just like this. You hang your head, you feel so bad. Rob, what are your thoughts on shame?
So I first kind of started thinking about shame seriously, listening to the words and reading the words of Brene Brown, who has made shame kind of, her central thesis in life. Shame and vulnerability, they're related. And, her kind of, her, kind of outlook on this is that shame is kind of the root of all of our stuff. And I used to listen to her thinking every problem that someone would bring to her, she could relate back to some sort of inherent shame. And I'd be like, okay, this seems like it's a little much. But the more I think about it, when I realize that any time that we experience a need to hide something from the world, like anything at all, that's shame in some way. And so
Mm.
kind of seen through that filter, I think it's huge and uh, really decaying in our psyche to be shameful about things in our life. Spiritually, I think my experience with people is that it starts in like kind of the faith that we were raised in. If we're taught to think that certain elements of ourselves are shameful, which in the Judeo-Christian world, regardless of how moderate or liberal you are, there are things that you know that are considered shameful, that it gets rooted in this place and then kind of keeps expanding in our world. And so we find ourselves shameful for things that we have no control over because they're how we are as human beings, like nudity or bodily functions, um, or and the world is strangely wants to inflict shame about this kind of stuff, but then kind of ignores the how we relate to each other. Like if you're going to pick on what to be concerned about or feel bad enough that you're going to make a change about, it should be how I treat another human being, not whether I like to go naked, around my house. You know what I mean?
Or I
So
farted in the movie theater.
yeah. Oh, don't even start with the bodily functions. Like I hate all bodily functions. I'd be great if we didn't have to urinate or defecate or anything. And, but no, I mean, I can joke about that, but at the same time, on some level, like what I'm feeling or wanting to not talk about it or not wanting to admit that that's what we do as human
Right.
beings is there's shame involved there. Where did that come from and what's the root of that? Like there seemed to be
Well,
this wave of like movies recently, animated flicks. When I first saw it, like I think there were fart jokes in Shrek, and I remember I was like, "What? Do we have to have fart jokes in Shrek? Like, why?" And I'm sure every kid that watched that movie, which it came out when I was, in my 40s, but um, probably felt seen, and parents could use this as a conversation about like, why do we have to talk about this at all? Like, why is this a joke?
right.
And then I started to see it everywhere. Or conversations in the bathroom. Like every show has a conversation where someone's in the bathroom peeing and they're having a talk, or the guys are standing at a urinal. It's like, why do I need to see this? But there's shame. I'm that's me. Like that is literally me. Like what is
Yeah.
involved?
And you're talking about the origins of shame, and you're saying religion, which is definitely a big one. I also think it's from, being a child and being taught this is good, this is bad, like being reprimanded for doing things that might be considered that where you then feel shame after you're reprimanded. Like, I was thinking about, where I've felt shame in my life. And, when the time I feel like I felt the most shame was I was trying to be cool with these cool girls. And I we decided to play, do phony phone calls kind of thing. And I called this girl up and I thought, I still feel shame talking about it. I called this girl up who was very obese and I told her, you're a fat pig. And then I hung up the phone and I was so like proud of myself for what I did, but soon after I felt this tremendous shame and which I still kind of carry with me all these years later. I ended up calling this girl up to apologize and her mom answered the phone and her mom said that she was crying in her room. And that was like, I want to say that was like in seventh grade. Um, a lot of times I feel like with shame, maybe you say something because you're triggered or whatever, and then you fire back with some cutthroat, nasty thing. And I don't know about you, but instantly, or not instantly, but maybe 5 minutes later, I start to feel really bad about it, really not guilty, but ashamed. I mean, because words can cut deep.
So that is what you're talking about. Brene has a very fine-tuned definition of guilt and shame. And like when I listen to your conversation, what what it feels like is, and they're related, but it sounds like the guilt that you I think you feel guilt at having done this to this girl, but she was the one that was shamed. Like, you know what I mean? So her experience of being overweight was shameful because the world saw this as shameful. You know what I mean? And, it feels like our shame is what, I don't know, like, if you feel, I mean, all these years later, if you feel shame about this, how can you release this so that you can move on with your life and so that you feel like, you can forgive yourself? It's a matter of kind of,
Yeah. Well, and that's actually that was something that I wanted to bring up anyways, because obviously she's long since over that, I'm sure, or she's not, but it was really like a 20-second conversation. But I have learned that you can, if you feel, for me, it doesn't feel like guilt. Guilt is something different for me. Like guilt is like, oh my gosh, why did I, whatever. Shame is like where I want to hang my head because why would I ever cut so low to somebody like that? Like my whole life, I've never said anything else like that. And that was just, it was terrible. But I think that the crux of this conversation to me anyway is that we hold ourselves to this heavy shame that we keep around and the other person has moved on. So what I do in these situations, and I actually did it with this person, but I think I'm still carrying it based on how I felt just recounting the story, is I will sit quietly and I will actually conjure up that person and I'll visualize me apologizing to that person. And then I forgive myself, because it's really sad what we do to ourselves. And of course, then there's so much shame that we have for ourselves just for being, right?
right.
Like, you know, I mean, like, can you think of any examples of
Yeah,
like,
well, I think we're talking about shame in two different ways. So, we talked about sex last week or our last episode. Well, I
right?
mean, shame and sex, they go hand in hand because we
Yeah.
are taught that our bodies, not even sex, our bodies are in some way shameful, which is kind of what I was opening with. So that way of being is something that we're taught. If a child wanders out into the room with full of adults and they're, holding on to their, genitals and, you know, they're taught some way that this is not appropriate or whatever, that there's, depending on how it's done, it can be a shameful experience that stays with you. So you're right, we feel shame for those things that we have no control over. I'm gay. You when you're young, that is a source of that kind of feeling of, I'm feeling shameful about who I am as a person that I can't even change, which is, I feel the same thing as feeling shame about our bodies.
Yeah.
um but you've also taken the conversation with me thinking about things in my life that I've done that I've not shared because I am ashamed of how I've hurt somebody, or how I've, you know, how I have acted outside of what I knew was the right way to be. And but
Right.
they both require us to release ourselves from it in order to be able to move on. So do you feel any
Right.
differently now that you shared that experience with this?
Well, I'm just surprised that I guess that's the first time I've ever spoken that story out loud, since it happened, and I can feel that I still carry some shame about it. I think the shame is like, it's almost like embarrassment, like when you're repeating it, like you're just like, God, how could I do that? Like it's like when your parents say to you, I'm so disappointed in you.
Yeah.
Like that's what it feels like. It feels like this massive disappointment in myself. And what I am also using as coping tools, because I do still carry shame. I mean, I definitely do. And another technique that I've been using, um, in Pam Grout's Course in Miracles book, one of the lessons, she tells a story.
My
I know,
favorite.
I love that book. She tells a story, about how one of her friends' mothers, who is from China, didn't speak any English and would walk around the neighborhood saying to everyone, the only thing she knew how to say in English was, I love you, bye. That's what she would say.
Love
And
that story.
I have adopted that as my new mantra. And every time I feel this feeling of shame or other things of guilt or like judgment or whatever, I'm starting to say to myself, I love you, bye, just to break the monotony of the circle of thought that's going around and around. Like, I can't believe you said that. What a horrible person you are. I can't believe you did that. Um, so that's been a way, like having a little mantra in place, because as we know, every time you think about something, you're bringing it to the present again, so you're reliving it again. So it's like so dangerous, and the only way for me to cut that thought off is to put in like a mantra or something.
Yeah, I in addition to the things that I feel like anytime that I am hiding something from someone because I'm afraid of their judgment, or I'm afraid of how I'm going to be perceived, or that I've not shared, like, honestly, so those are the things that I may or may not have control over, like, any sort of bodily function thing. Like, I heard a story on a podcast recently where it's a famous actor talked about being on a set, and pooping his pants on the set. And like, I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't. It was a funny story because he's a comedian, funny story, and yet, like, I couldn't believe he was sharing this. But then I was thinking, well, why wouldn't he share this? Like, so what? Like, this is funny. We all do it. So there's that. So anytime that I feel like I'm hiding from that kind of experience, I'm there's shame in my life. But kind of related to yours, I'm also in a relationship. We've had fights. I've said things that you can't take back, and those also are places in my life where it's like, oh, even if the person that I've done this to can move beyond it and forgive me, or maybe didn't even realize that what I said was as mean as it was, or whatever. I still know that I did it. And so it's hard to move on from that. Like, how do you
Yeah.
recover when you've said that thing or done that thing? Or, I'm pretty passive aggressive in how I move through life. So I've been able to kind of move pieces on the board of my life in a way that probably would be, considered ethically questionable. You know, how I've been able to, play a person against another person, or
Yeah.
reward. So, I mean, the things that I don't think are morally questionable, that I don't feel shame about, I think that would be concerning. People, they say that people that don't feel that kind of shame are the ones that are the psychopath, the borderline
Right.
personality narcissists. So
Right.
I'm always trying to be in question of like, okay, so I've done this thing that I feel in the world is not a good thing. So I feel shame about it. Um, like I'm always trying to check and balance those things, and then also to not be shameful for things that I have no control over. Like they're in two different buckets,
Yeah. I
but they
mean,
do guide us so much through our day.
yeah, it's amazing how much we torture ourselves about things that make us feel ashamed. And like you said, there's two different kinds of shame. I mean, there's the shame when you fart in public or poop your pants or whatever. They make good stories later, but in the moment they're pretty hard. But those kinds of things, you get past those things. But the kinds of things that are real, like emotional hurts, where we hurt somebody else. Well, here's one. I cheated in college and got busted. It was like a group of us and had to
You
go
are
to
spilling the
judiciary.
tea.
That's what this show is, baby.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
And we had to go to judiciary board and have a hearing about it. We flunked the class and had to retake the class. I felt so much shame about this that it's okay because I've now come clean with my father, but at the time I lied and told him I did not cheat. I don't know what's going on. I did not cheat because I couldn't face my father, because he believed in me so much. And he was like, "Did you really do this?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. It was this person. It was this person. It wasn't me," because I felt so much shame. And that was heavy. And that stayed with me for a long time. Obviously, now that I'm talking about it, I don't feel that shame anymore. But, this kind of stuff is so indoctrinated in us. Like, why did I cheat? Because it was a class that was too hard for me that I didn't understand and didn't have the interest in. I mean, not to give myself a pass, but I feel like in some ways our world is set up to create a lot of shame.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, now we've got somebody, if you look at, not to get political, but we've got somebody in Congress now, this George Santos is in there, and he's lied and made up all these things and appears to be shameless. So how, if I am working with somebody, if I'm seeing somebody like this, how do I not act shamefully or in a way that I consider shamefully how do I not make his shame? I'm thinking, oh my gosh, have you no shame to do all this? And then I'm thinking, but if I was working with somebody close to me, I would not want them to have shame. Like our world is set up so that I'm incredulous that somebody could get away with so much, but in the end, it has to come back to me. Like, why is this bothering me? This other person, like aside from the fact that I can't believe that it's happening,
Pretty
but
shocking.
I'm questioning his morality or ethics. But why is that bothering me so much? And can I get to why it is affecting me? You know, and do I have my own shame attached to his shame?
Right.
Like, does he become all of us in some way? Like, what did
Right.
we get away with that
Right.
we just kept sailing through? And are we all
Right.
just reacting to that time that we got past and
Right.
didn't?
They say that when we judge other people, it's because we're seeing a piece of
Right,
ourselves
right.
in them. Right.
And
Yeah.
is he just like the repository of all of this? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, this is a difficult topic because I think some people might watch this and be like, I don't ever feel shame. It's a touchy word. Like when you say the word shame, you almost feel shame for saying shame. Do you know what I mean? It's such a, to me, I just think of hanging my head or, no, it just feels so dark, you know?
Dogs are barking on cue. No, I know, and I remember there's that great scene in Game of Thrones that everybody talks about. Cersei the Queen's, her affair with her brother, and the fact that she's had children with him has come to light, and she's marching through the town naked, and everybody's screaming shame at her. And as a viewer, she was just such an evil character to that point. Like we're all delighted in this. Like everybody's like, yes, you should feel horrible for all the things you've done. And we attach ourselves to situations where we can look at other people and
Yeah,
hope for their karmic retribution for these things. But does
right,
that just help us forget the fact that there are things that we need to come correct with in ourselves,
right,
and there are things that we have to let go of that we don't need to come correct with? Like I don't
right.
need to feel shameful about whatever. I just go back to like nude. I go back to nudists a lot because I've met a couple of nudists in my life, like people who like to be naked. And we have these ideas of people going, oh my God, why do I want to go, why would I want to be in a community and have all those people there that, I don't need to see any of that. And I always go back to that is my visceral reaction, but in my heart I'm going, but why? This is our bodies. Like, why should anybody feel shameful about any part of their body doing anything that it just does? Dogs and cats and other animals don't.
Right.
So, what are those things that I can use to help me advance in life? And what are those things that I can let go of that I had no reason to be shameful for to begin with? And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. I think with shame, I mean the word judgment and shame are like interchangeable, right? Because if you are looking at someone else and thinking, "Oh my God, how could they do that? They should be ashamed of themselves." You're judging that. I mean, they're both equally as awful. And so
Right.
perhaps if we weren't a judgmental society, there would be no shame. Maybe judgment came before shame.
I My okay, that would scare me because I think would we just all then hide anything we consider shameful. I think about the things that I do that I might not want everybody to know that I do, or um,
Yeah, but you don't want people to know what you do because you feel like they would judge you. They would form opinions based on your behavior.
right, which means that we're not living that. Like so, then we would become our already though in a way. Like we have also talked about living our authentic selves. So I'm thinking that releasing the shame would help us become more of who we are, help express ourselves more authentically.
But
But I
maybe
do think, yeah,
maybe we need to have compassion for people who are feeling shame, like let's say Santos, if we could. Like, I mean, that's a big ask, but now, I'm reading Course in Miracles, and I mean, it talks a lot about that. Like, it doesn't matter what the situation is, you know,
tell you,
yeah, it's all you and it's all about your thoughts.
yep,
And
which
anything that is not about love, peace, and joy basically
is not real.
is not real. And yeah. And wouldn't that be interesting if we could have compassion for those people that are appearing to do and to be shameful?
Right. And I mean, and then at some point, like the course says, does that includes us? Like we have to
Yeah,
like let peace begin with me. Like it really makes sense, especially when you
right,
read Pam Grout's book because it's so effective in making this point. But I think you're right. Like as you read that, her interpretation of the Course in Miracles comes back to that every single time. Like there's a lesson for every day, but in the end, if you look at them, it's like, but they're saying the same thing. This is what happens, and you can change your perspective if you change your thought about it. And so and don't take your eye off yourself because whatever is bothering you is really about you,
right.
and including what you're shameful about. So
So it all begins with me. And
right.
so first of all, I mean, so I wrote down a couple things. Like I spoke before that I felt like, I needed a mantra now to sort of break that thought cycle of shame. And, I also wrote, we can heal through visualization, through intention, through prayer, where we, visualize maybe either if we were mean to somebody, if we feel shame for words that we said, we don't actually have to call them up or say it face to face, because maybe we feel so much shame we can't even do that. So, but if we sat quietly and visualized that interaction happening, and then prayed for the healing of that, um, then we really do a service for ourselves. We're just so dang hard on ourselves. And if we could be like kind to ourselves, I think we'd be a lot kinder to those that are not being so great or appear to not be so great in the world.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I feel like, um, also paying attention to when we feel like we're hiding something. And I mean like everywhere. So if you close a door to do something in private, is that a place to start thinking about, oh, what am I hiding versus what am I protecting? Someone comes up behind you on a computer if you're at work and you slam like your laptop, or you close out the screen. Like, so not feeling shameful, but paying attention to those moments in our life that is happening, and then stopping and going, okay, am I feeling shameful, or am I protecting something that deserves to be protected? And do I know the difference? Like, can
Right.
I understand the difference? Uh, and just kind of moving through life and seeing if we can make those pauses again in that moment where we can shift our thinking and just
Yeah,
know which one it is. Is it like a rational thing, or is it something that can be unlearned in some way?
that's a really good idea. Yeah, everything is always about pausing and noticing and observing and witnessing,
It is, and
so
and
that
I'm
we
so glad
can,
you're working with Pam Grout too, because that's really what she's saying at every
yeah,
turn. Like,
yeah,
and that's where it takes practice, is that pause.
yeah. But, I understand why it's so programmed in us to immediately judge either ourselves or other people, because that's truly where our foundation started,
Right,
This is right, this is wrong.
right,
We don't poop in our pants in public. We don't.
right,
I mean, I remember when I was raising little kids, all the things where I would say, no, we don't say that, or no, we don't do that. Well, why not? You know?
right. I mean, and are those times? So I'm not a parent, but I mean, my question to you would be: Are there had to have been those times where you had, at some point your kid's going to answer, ask you back, like, why don't we do this? And at some point, you're going to be able, if you know your stuff, and you're such a beautiful parent, your kids are so wonderful, that you were able to know the difference. Like, this is why we don't. And then other times where you could go, huh, I really am not sure why this is not the way it is. And be more open to society's version of why we don't do things in a certain way. And then, to just be clear. It seems like you'd have to be able to answer those questions at some point, and then be reflective enough
Yeah.
to
And
say,
sometimes when you're a
I don't
parent,
know, maybe you're right. Maybe we shouldn't be.
yeah, but sometimes, it was the embarrassment to me of like, well, if you behave like this, then I look like a bad parent. If I let you have this tantrum full flat, in front on the mall where the mall goes silent, and that did happen to me a couple times. The reason I was mortified was because of what people were thinking of me. And I
Wow,
think shame has a lot to do with that. What are you thinking of me?
wow, that's huge. Like, that's a leap that I can't say that I would talk to certainly my parents would never even see as being part of it. Like, being worried about what's happening with them. Like, I always used to think, well, my parents used to say, well, I want, this is about you. You shouldn't be doing this. I'm more concerned about you. And I would always think, okay, that may be true. You're not lying about that, but you're also concerned about you. Like, you are concerned about, if I do this thing, you
Yeah.
know.
What the other parents say.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I I remember one time, I wrote. I was right after I moved to DC, and I sent a letter to my hometown paper about something that was happening in the world. That was my hometown paper took a stand on an issue with gay people. That I wrote a letter to the editor to from DC, and it was printed, but I never told my parents that it was running. And so, my mother just instantly like, and I went to this family reunion where everybody's like telling me how great this letter was. And my mom's saying, what are you talking about? What letter is this? And I had to, kind of pull it out and tell her. Other people had to tell her what it was. And, all of this was this big triggering thing like, oh, you want me to somehow, I'm supposed to be ashamed of my life and my stance and my stuff. And for the longest time, I assumed that the rest of my extended family on her side would also feel this way, but they weren't. They were supportive. And so now she's the only one that's questioning why everybody knows this but her. But like, this is where that, like, I had gotten to a point where, yes, I knew I was taking a stand publicly that was going to be in my hometown where I wasn't necessarily quote unquote out to some people.
Yeah.
Um, and I was choosing to not feel shame, not really giving a crap whether she did or not, and feeling like, well, if she did, it would be her issue. But I remember this big convergence of whose shame am I feeling right now? Like, and how do we, kind of get through this?
Yeah. There's a lot of levels of shame, like a lot of sides of it. Well, we are out of time. So I guess closing thoughts. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Just my one closing thought is usually let's pay attention to those things that we might be experiencing and what our topic is.
Yeah.
Take it in
Yeah.
our hearts.
Notice when those thoughts come in. I liked what you said about, when you feel that you need to hide whatever it is that you're doing from other people, that obviously you feel shame in that moment. Notice that and pay attention to that. And then my closing thought would be, to go easier on yourself, I mean, I'm carrying a story that happened when I was 12, and I still feel shame about that. Like, we're so hard on ourselves. And the best thing that we can do is forgive ourselves and give ourselves a break, because at the end of the day, we are humans going through a very difficult human experience. And some days we ride that wave nice, and some days we are just stinky all the way. And that's just part of the journey. It's part of that wave, right?
Totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, in the description section, I will provide a link for that book we were talking about, the Pam Grout's Course in Miracles workbook. It is fantastic. I'm working through it with a group of people right now, and Rob did with a group of people.
I knew you'd love it.
Yeah, it's really good. Check that book out, and come see us next week when we find something else scandalous to talk about.
Spilling that spirituality. Yes.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.